In the fog-draped halls of Blackthorn Manor, 1937, a scream shatters a candlelit dinner, leading Detective Hercule Poirot to a locked-room murder, when quiet secretary Iris Temple is found stabbed, clutching a singed note and a sapphire earring. Secrets unravel among the guests: elegant Lady Evelyn, secretive Sir Reginald, vivacious Clara, reserved Dr. Ashby, flamboyant Victor Crane, sharped Mrs. Lyle, and brooding Captain Ramsay. A hidden passage, a stolen necklace, and a candle concealing a key point to greed and betrayal. As Poirot's grey cells unravel the truth, the flickering flames reveal a killer hiding in plain sight. Will justice burn bright, or will the manor's shadows prevail? Chapter 1. The Invitation to Blackthorn Manor. The autumn of 1937 had draped London in a veil of melancholy, the air sharp with the tamp of damp leaves and coal smoke. In his meticulously ordered flat at Whitehaven Mansions, Hercule Poirot sat at a polished mahogany desk, a delicate cup of tisane steaming beside him, its fragrance of chamomile and mint a quiet comfort against the drizzle pattering the windows. The morning's correspondence was arranged with military precision: bills to the left, social invitations to the right, and, at the center, a single envelope that commanded his attention. It was of thick cream vellum, sealed with a wax crest, depicting a thorny vine entwined around a rose, its elegance marred only by a faint smudge of ink. The address, in a flowing hand, read, Monsieur Hercule Poirot, Detective Extraordinaire. Poirot's moustache twitched as he slit the envelope with a silver letter opener, revealing a letter from Lady Evelyn Marwood of Blackthorn Manor, a Jacobean estate in the Sussex countryside. The note was concise, its tone a careful blend of courtesy and urgency. Dear Monsieur Poirot, your renown as a man of unparalleled perception precedes you. I find myself in need of such perception for a matter of some delicacy, which I dare not commit to paper. I cordially invite you to Blackthorn Manor for a weekend gathering, commencing this Friday evening. Your presence would greatly reassure me, and I trust you will find the company stimulating. A car will meet you at Blackthorn Station at 6 o'clock. Yours sincerely, Evelyn Marwood. Poirot leaned back, his small hands folded over his waistcoat, his eyes narrowing as he pondered the letter's subtext. A matter of delicacy, she wrote, yet offered no hint of its nature. Intriguing, deliberate vagueness. Was it a theft, a scandal, or something darker? The absence of detail was a lure, and Poirot, ever drawn to the challenge of a puzzle, felt his grey cells stir. He consulted his pocket diary, its pages as orderly as his thoughts, and confirmed no conflicting engagements. With a flourish of his fountain pen, he composed a brief acceptance, his script as precise as his mind. The prospect of a country weekend, with a mystery to unravel, was a welcome respite from London's predictable social whirl. Friday afternoon found Poirot aboard the 4:15 train from Victoria Station, his valise packed with a gentleman's essentials: tailored suits, a selection of ties, and a small notebook for observations. The carriage was sparsely populated, its occupants absorbed in newspapers or staring at the mist-shrouded fields beyond the windows. Poirot, clad in a charcoal overcoat and Homburg hat, sat by the window, his sharp eyes noting the shift from urban sprawl to rural quietude. The train rattled through hamlets of half-timber-bird cottages, their chimneys trailing smoke into the twilight, until it reached Blackthorn Station, a small platform flanked by ancient yews, their branches heavy with the weight of autumn. A chauffeur, a doorman named Perkins, awaited him, his peaked cap pulled low. Without ceremony, He led Poirot to a gleaming Rolls-Royce, its engine idling softly in the gathering dusk. The drive to Blackthorn Manor wound through narrow lanes, hedgerows looming like silent guardians in the fog. Poirot noted the isolation: no villagers, no passers-by, only the occasional hoot of an owl piercing the stillness. The manor emerged abruptly, a silhouette of gabled roofs and chimneys against the fading sky, its ivy-clad walls and mullioned windows exuding an air of ancient secrets. Candlelight glowed faintly from within, a beacon in the mist, and Poirot's curiosity sharpened. The car halted on a gravel drive, and Perkins escorted Poirot to the entrance, where the heavy oak door swung open to reveal Lady Evelyn Marwood. She was a striking woman in her late 40s, her auburn hair swept into a chignon, her emerald green gown accentuating the pallor of her skin. Her eyes, sharp yet shadowed, betrayed a flicker of unease as she extended a hand. "Monsieur," she said, her voice warm but strained, "your presence is a great relief. Welcome to Blackthorn Manor." She led him into the oak-panelled hall, its walls adorned with portraits of stern Marwood ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow the newcomer. A grand staircase spiraled upward, its balustrade carved with vines that echoed the wax seal of her letter. The air was heavy with the scent of beeswax and old wood, and the candlelit sconces cast long shadows that danced across the flagstones. Lady Evelyn gestured toward a side table, where a silver tray held a decanter of sherry, a drink before dinner. She offered, but Poirot declined with a polite bow, preferring to keep his senses unclouded. "Your letter, madame, it speaks of a delicate matter," Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing. "Perhaps you might share a little more to prepare Hercule Poirot for what lies ahead." Lady Evelyn's smile faltered, her fingers tightening on her fan. "It is complex, monsieur. I fear it involves matters of trust, of secrets within my household, but let us not spoil the evening. You will meet the others at dinner, and perhaps you will see for yourself." Her evasion was artful, but Poirot noted the tremor in her voice, the quick glance toward the staircase. He inclined his head, content to wait, knowing the truth would reveal itself in time. She guided him to his room, a spacious chamber on the second floor with a four-poster bed and a view of the fog-bound gardens. The furnishings were antique, the tapestries faded but elegant, and a single candle burned on the bedside table, its flame steady despite the draught. Poirot unpacked methodically, arranging his toiletries with precision, his mind already cataloguing the manor's atmosphere. Grand, isolated, and heavy with unspoken tension. He adjusted his tie in the mirror, his reflection a study in calm anticipation, and descended for dinner, ready to observe the players in this unfolding drama. The dining room was a cavern of opulence, its long mahogany table set for 9, illuminated by 3 silver candelabras, each bearing a dozen tapers. The light played across tapestried walls depicting medieval hunts, their colors muted by age. Lady Evelyn introduced Poirot to the guests as they assembled, her voice carrying a forced brightness. Sir Reginald Marwood, her husband, was a tall man in his late 50s, his silver hair and clipped mustache lending him a diplomatic air. He greeted Poirot with a firm handshake but little warmth, his eyes lingering on the candelabras as if they held answers he sought. Their daughter, Clara Marwood, was a vivacious young woman of 22. Her blonde curls and sapphire dress, a splash of modernity against the manor's antiquity. Her laughter was bright but brittle, and Poirot noted her frequent glances at her fiancé, Dr. Leonard Ashby, a lean physician with dark hair and a reserved demeanor. Victor Crane, an art dealer with florid cheeks and a gold watch chain, exuded a theatrical charm, while Mrs. Dorothy Lyle, a widowed novelist, observed all with a sharp, almost predatory gaze. Captain Hugh Ramsay, a war veteran with a rugged handsomeness, carried a brooding intensity, his scarred hands hinting at a violent past. Miss Iris Temple, Lady Evelyn's secretary, was a quiet figure in grey, her spectacles glinting as she adjusted them nervously. Dinner was announced, and the guests took their places, the candlelight casting their shadows into a restless dance. Lady Evelyn explained the tradition of dining by candlelight, a nod to the manor's history, but Poirot noted her hands trembled as she spoke. Conversation turned to a recent London theft, a sapphire necklace belonging to a duchess, still unsolved. Crane boasted of his knowledge of gem markets, while Sir Reginald dismissed the topic with a wave. As dessert was served, a scream pierced the air from upstairs, shattering the fragile civility. Lady Evelyn rose, her face pale, and the guests followed, rushing toward the library, where Poirot sensed the first act of this mystery was about to unfold. Chapter 2. The guests assembled. The dining room of Blackthorn Manor was a study in opulent gloom, its long mahogany table gleaming under the flicker of 3 silver candelabras, each bearing a dozen tapers. The candlelight cast intricate shadows across the tapestried walls, where scenes of medieval hunts seemed to writhe in the half-dark. Heavy velvet curtains framed the mullioned windows, shutting out the misty Sussex night, and a fire crackled in the vast hearth, its warmth barely reaching the far ends of the room. Hercule Poirot, seated to the right of Lady Evelyn Marwood, surveyed the assembled company with the keen eye of a naturalist observing a new species. The table was set for 9, and each guest, in their manner and bearing, presented a facet of the puzzle he had been summoned to unravel. Lady Evelyn, at the head of the table, presided with the grace of a seasoned hostess, though Poirot noted a faint tremor in her hand as she lifted her wineglass. Her auburn hair, swept into an elegant chignon, caught the candlelight, and her emerald green gown accentuated the pallor of her skin. She spoke with measured warmth, introducing Poirot to the guests as a dear friend from London, renowned for his discernment. Her eyes, however, darted toward her husband, Sir Reginald Marwood, seated opposite her, suggesting an undercurrent of tension. Sir Reginald, a man in his late 50s with a patrician air, wore his dinner jacket with the ease of one accustomed to authority. His silver hair was meticulously combed, and his moustache, though less fastidious than Poirot's, was neatly trimmed. A retired diplomat, he spoke sparingly, his comments confined to the quality of the claret and the provenance of a rare first edition he had recently acquired. Poirot observed his detachment, noting how Sir Reginald's gaze lingered on the candelabras, as if counting the flames. To Sir Reginald's left sat their daughter, Clara Marwood, a young woman of 22, whose vivacity seemed at odds with the sombre setting. Her blonde curls bounced as she laughed, her blue eyes sparkling with a restless energy. She wore a modern silk dress, its sapphire hue clashing slightly with the room's antique decor. Clara's conversation flitted from the latest London plays to the merits of her new motor car, but Poirot detected a forced gaiety, as if she were performing for an unseen audience. Her fiancé, Dr. Leonard Ashby, sat beside her, a contrast in temperament. A physician in his early 30s, he was lean and pale, with dark hair and a reserved demeanor. His responses to Clara's chatter were polite but curt, and his fingers toyed nervously with his napkin. Across the table, Mr. Victor Crane, an art dealer of some repute, held court with the confidence of a man accustomed to charming his way through life. His florid cheeks and expressive hands animated tales of Parisian auctions and Venetian galleries, though Poirot noted a certain exaggeration in his anecdotes, as if he were embellishing for effect. Crane's dinner jacket was cut in the latest fashion, and a gold watch chain gleamed against his waistcoat. His eyes, however, flicked toward Lady Evelyn with a familiarity that Poirot found intriguing. Mrs. Dorothy Lyle, a widowed novelist in her late 40s, sat opposite Crane, her sharp features softened by a cascade of dark hair streaked with grey. Her black velvet gown was understated, but her keen eyes missed nothing, darting from face to face, as if gathering material for her next book. She spoke little, but when she did, her observations were laced with a dry wit that bordered on cutting. Poirot sensed she was a woman who saw more than she revealed. Her notebook likely filled with secrets disguised as fiction. Captain Hugh Ramsay, a war veteran with a rugged handsomeness, occupied the seat to Poirot's left. His military bearing was evident in his upright posture, but his eyes, shadowed beneath heavy brows, carried a brooding intensity. He spoke sparingly, his voice low and measured, and his scarred hands suggested a life of action rather than leisure. When questioned about his recent travels, he mentioned a stint in Cairo, but his answers were vague, as if he preferred the past to remain unexamined. The final guest, Miss Iris Temple, Lady Evelyn's private secretary, was a study in unobtrusive efficiency, slender and bespectacled, with mousy hair pinned tightly. She sat at the far end of the table, her presence almost ghostly in the candlelight. Her grey dress blended into the shadows, and she spoke only when addressed, her voice soft but precise. Poirot noted her habit of adjusting her spectacles, a nervous tic that betrayed an otherwise composed exterior. She was, he surmised, a woman who knew more of Blackthorn's secrets than most, as the first coarser veloute of chestnut and parsnip was served. Lady Evelyn explained the manners tradition of dining by candlelight. "It is a custom from my husband's ancestors," she said, her voice light but strained. They believed it brought the family closer to the manor's history, to its soul. Sir Reginald nodded absently, but Poirot caught a flicker of discomfort in his expression, as if the tradition held less charm for him than his wife suggested. Conversation turned to the recent theft of a sapphire necklace from a London duchess, a topic that sparked varied reactions. Victor Crane leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. "The gem market is buzzing with rumors," he said, swirling his wine. "A piece like that doesn't vanish, it finds a new owner, discreetly." His tone suggested insider knowledge, though. He quickly changed the subject when Poirot pressed for details. Mrs. Lyle remarked that such thefts made excellent fodder for her novels, her pen scratching notes even as she spoke. Clara, with a theatrical shiver, declared it deliciously scandalous, while Dr. Ashby remained silent, his gaze fixed on his plate. Captain Ramsay dismissed the topic as London nonsense, and Iris Temple said nothing, her eyes fixed on the candelabra before her. The meal progressed through courses of pheasant and roasted vegetables, the clink of silverware punctuated by bursts of laughter or strained silence. Poirot, ever the observer, noted the interplay of glances. Clara's frequent looks toward Dr. Ashby, who avoided her gaze, Lady Evelyn's watchful eye on her husband, and Crane's occasional smirk at Iris, who did not return it. The atmosphere, though outwardly convivial, was laced with an undercurrent of unease, as if each guest harbored a secret they feared the candlelight might expose. As the dessert's delicate pear tart was served, a piercing scream shattered the room's fragile harmony. It came from upstairs, sharp and unmistakable, cutting through the murmur of conversation like a blade. The guests froze, forks suspended, eyes wide. Lady Evelyn rose, her chair scraping against the floor, her face pale. That was from Sony. Vegas Pro from upstairs, she said, her voice trembling. We must go at once. The party surged to their feet, following her up the grand staircase, the candlelight casting wild shadows as they moved. Poirot, with his characteristic calm, followed at a measured pace, his mind already piecing together the possibilities. The scream, he knew, was no mere accident. It was the prelude to a mystery, and the candlelit halls of Blackthorn Manor were about to reveal their secrets. Chapter 3. The body in the library. The grand staircase of Blackthorn Manor creaked under the hurried steps of the guests, their shadows leaping across the oak-panelled walls as the candelabras in the hall flickered in the draught. The scream, sharp and chilling, still echoed in Hercule Poirot's mind as he followed the group, his polished shoes tapping rhythmically on the polished wood. Lady Evelyn led the way, her emerald gown catching the light like a beacon, her face taut with dread. Behind her, Clara Marwood clung to Dr. Leonard Ashby's arm, her sapphire dress a vivid contrast to his somber black. Victor Crane's florid face was flushed with excitement, while Mrs. Dorothy Lyle's sharp eyes gleamed with a writer's curiosity. Captain Hugh Ramsay strode with military precision, and Sir Reginald Marwood brought up the rear, his expression unreadable. The absence of Iris Temple, the quiet secretary, was conspicuous, and Poirot's grey cells were already at work. Sensing the scream's origin, the library door, heavy oak carved with ivy motifs, stood at the end of a dimly lit corridor. Lady Evelyn reached it first, her hand trembling as she turned the brass handle. It was locked. She rattled it, her voice rising. "Iris, Iris, are you there?" No answer came. Sir Reginald stepped forward, producing a key from his pocket with a calmness that Poirot noted as oddly detached. The lock clicked, and the door swung inward, revealing a scene that drew a collective gasp. Iris Temple sat slumped in her backed armchair, her spectacles askew, her mousy hair spilling from its tight bun. A dagger protruded from her chest, its silver handle glinting in the light of a single candle on the table beside her. The flame burned steadily, its wax pooling unevenly, a stark contrast to the stillness of the body. Blood-stained irises, grey dress, dark and spreading, and her hands clutched a crumpled piece of paper. Her face bore an expression of frozen surprise, as if death had caught her unawares. Clara stifled a scream, burying her face in Dr. Ashby's shoulder. Lady Evelyn swayed, clutching the doorframe, while Sir Reginald's jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on the dagger. Victor Crane muttered an oath under his breath, and Mrs. Lyle, ever the observer, stepped closer, her notebook already in hand. Captain Ramsay remained at the threshold, his scarred hands clenched, his gaze darting around the room. Poirot, with the composure that had unravelled countless mysteries, stepped forward, his small frame commanding authority. "Madame et messieurs," he said, his voice crisp, "we must disturb nothing. Monsieur le butler, summon the police. At once, the rest of you, remain here, but touch nothing." He gestured to the butler, who had appeared silently at the door, his face pale. The man nodded and hurried away. Poirot approached the body, his keen eyes scanning every detail. The library was a cavernous room, its walls lined with leather-bound volumes, their gilt titles catching the candlelight. A massive fireplace stood. Cold, its hearth swept clean. The windows, tall and leaded, were latched from the inside, their heavy curtains undisturbed. The only other exit was a bookcase that Poirot suspected concealed a hidden passage, a feature common in such ancient houses. The key remained in the lock, confirming the room had been secured from within. He knelt beside Iris, careful not to disturb her position. The dagger, an ornate piece with a filigreed handle, was embedded deeply, suggesting force and intent. There was no blood on her hands, ruling out self-infliction. Poirot gently extracted the crumpled paper from her grasp, smoothing it on the table. In a neat, feminine hand, it read, "The truth burns brighter than any flame." One corner was singed, as if held too close to the candle. The words were cryptic, their meaning obscure, but Poirot sensed they were no accident. He slipped the note into his pocket, mindful of the police's arrival. Turning to the candle, he noted its peculiar state. The wax had hardened into an irregular shape, with a faint indentation at its base. Using a handkerchief, he lifted it carefully, revealing nothing beneath but a polished table, yet the candle's placement, solitary and precise, suggested it held significance beyond mere illumination. Poirot's gaze swept the room, landing on the bookcase, a massive structure that seemed slightly askew. He pressed its panels, searching for a mechanism, but found none immediately. The guests watched in silence, their faces a gallery of shock, fear, and, in some cases, calculation. Lady Evelyn broke the silence. How could this happen? The door was locked. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were dry, and Poirot noted the absence of tears. Sir Reginald placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch perfunctory. "We must wait for the police, my dear. They'll sort this out." Clara, her voice choked, whispered, "Poor Iris. She was so quiet. Who would do this?" Dr. Ashby murmured something soothing, but his eyes avoided the body, focusing instead on the floor. Victor Crane, attempting levity, remarked, "A locked room, a dagger, quite the theatrical touch, eh?" His grin faltered under Poirot's steady gaze. Mrs. Lyle scribbled furiously, muttering, "This will make a splendid chapter." Captain Ramsay said nothing, his silence more eloquent than words. Within the hour, Inspector Cobb arrived, a stout man with a florid face and a moustache that rivaled Poirot's in volume, if not in elegance. Accompanied by a constable, he surveyed the scene with a briskness that betrayed inexperience. "Looks like suicide," he declared after a cursory glance. Locked room, dagger in hand, textbook case. Poirot's moustache twitched with disapproval. "Nan, Monsieur Lins, observe the angle of the dagger to steep for self-infliction. And her hands, they are clean of blood. This is murder, most assuredly." Cobb bristled but said nothing, allowing Poirot to continue his examination. Poirot questioned the guests briefly, establishing their movements. Lady Evelyn claimed she had lingered in the dining room, overseeing the staff. Sir Reginald said he was in his study, reviewing correspondence. Clara and Dr. Ashby insisted they were together in the conservatory, admiring the orchids. Victor Crane had been in the hall, studying a portrait of a Marwood ancestor. Mrs. Lyle was in her room, writing, and Captain Ramsay claimed a solitary walk in the gardens, despite the drizzle. None admitted to seeing Iris after dinner, though Poirot noted Clara's hesitation and Crane's overly casual shrugged. As the police photographed the scene, Poirot lingered by the bookcase, his fingers tracing its edges. A faint draught stirred the candle's flame, confirming his suspicion of a hidden passage. He pressed a panel, and with a soft click, the bookcase shifted, revealing a narrow corridor. Lady Evelyn gasped. "That's an old family secret," she said. "Only we Marwoods know of it." Her eyes flicked to Sir Reginald, who looked away. Poirot stepped into the passage, its walls damp and cobwebbed, leading to a staircase that ascended to the attic. He made a mental note to explore it later, under better light. For now, the locked room was no longer a mystery. Access had been possible, and the murderer had used it. But why Iris? And what did the singed note signify? As the guests were ushered back to the drawing room, Poirot remained, his mind turning over the details. The dagger's craftsmanship, the candle's wax, the note's cryptic message. Iris Temple had been no mere secretary. She had held a key to Blackthorn's secrets, and someone had ensured she would never reveal them. The candlelight, dim but persistent, seemed to mock the darkness, promising that the truth, like its flame, would not be easily extinguished. Chapter 4. The Shadows of Suspicion, the morning after Iris Temple's murder. Blackthorn Manor was cloaked in a heavy silence, broken only by the distant clatter of breakfast preparations. The mist outside had thickened, pressing against the mullion windows like a shroud, and the air within carried a chill that no fire could dispel. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, his moustache waxed to perfection, descended the grand staircase with measured steps. His night had been restless, his grey cells turning over the details of the library scene, the dagger's ornate handle, the singed note, the candle's uneven wax, and the hidden passage behind the bookcase. The murder was no random act, bore the marks of calculation, and Poirot sensed the key to its unravelling lay in the guests' guarded secrets. In the breakfast room, the atmosphere was strained, the clink of porcelain and silverware a fragile veneer over unspoken tensions. Lady Evelyn sat at the head of the table, her auburn hair pinned tightly, her face pale but composed. She sipped her tea with mechanical precision, her eyes avoiding the empty chair where Iris Temple might have sat. Sir Reginald, at the opposite end, buried himself in the Times, though Poirot noted his fingers gripped the paper too tightly to be reading. Clara Marwood, her blonde curls less vibrant in the grey light, picked at her toast, her gaze flitting nervously to Dr. Leonard Ashby, who stared into his coffee with a furrowed brow. Victor Crane, ever the showman, buttered his scone with exaggerated care, his joviality muted but not extinguished. Mrs. Dorothy Lyle, her notebook open beside her plate, scribbled observations between bites, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Captain Hugh Ramsay, his military posture rigid, ate in silence, his scarred hands steady but his expression guarded. Poirot took his seat, accepting a cup of café au lait from the butler with a nod. "A tragic night, n'est-ce pas?" he remarked, his voice light but probing. The guests murmured agreement, their responses cautious. Lady Evelyn set down her cup, her voice low. "Poor Iris. I still can't believe it. She was so indispensable." Her words carried a tremor, and Poirot noted Sir Reginald's brief glance at his wife, a flicker of something irritation, perhaps. Crossing his face, Inspector Cobb had departed at dawn, leaving a constable to guard the library and promising to return with forensic results. His initial insistence on suicide had wavered under Poirot's evidence, but his departure left the manor in a state of uneasy limbo. Poirot, undeterred, resolved to question each guest, seeking the cracks in their alibis and the motives hidden beneath their polished facades. He began with Lady Evelyn, inviting her to the morning room, a cozy space with chintz, curtains and a view of the fog-bound gardens. She sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap, her emerald eyes wary. "Monsieur Poirot, I assure you, I was in the drawing-room after dinner, overseeing the staff. I saw nothing of Iris after we left the dining-room." Her voice was steady, but Poirot noted the slight twitch of her fingers. He pressed gently, asking about Iris's role. "She was more than a secretary," Lady Evelyn admitted. "She managed my correspondence, my appointments, even personal matters. She knew everything about Blackthorn." Her hesitation suggested Iris's knowledge extended to secrets Lady Evelyn preferred to keep buried. Next, Poirot spoke with Sir Reginald in his study, a room lined with rare books and maps, its air heavy with pipe smoke. Sir Reginald was curt, claiming he had been reviewing diplomatic papers after dinner. "I heard nothing until the scream," he said, his eyes fixed on a bronze bust of Wellington. Poirot noted a smudge of ink on his cuff, unusual for a man so meticulous, and asked about Iris's work with his collection. Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. "She was cataloguing my books, nothing more. Tedious work, but she was efficient." His dismissal was too quick, and Poirot filed it away for later scrutiny. Clara and Dr. Ashby, interviewed together in the conservatory, presented a united front, though their body language told a different story. Clara's voice was brittle as she described their time among the orchids. "We were together the whole time, weren't we, Leonard?" Dr. Ashby nodded, but his eyes avoided hers, and his fingers drummed on the armrest. Poirot asked if they had seen Iris, and Clara hesitated, her cheeks flushing. She was always so quiet, slipping about like a ghost. "I didn't notice her after dinner." Dr. Ashby's silence was telling, and Poirot sensed a rift between the couple, perhaps tied to Iris's death. Victor Crane, questioned in the billiard room, was effusive, his hands gesturing as he described admiring a portrait in the hall. "A fine Gainsborough, you know, could fetch a fortune in Paris." His alibi was vague, and when Poirot mentioned Iris's knowledge of the art market, Crane's smile faltered. "She was a clever girl, but I barely knew her," he said, too quickly. Poirot noted the sweat on his brow, despite the room's chill. Mrs. Lyle, interviewed in the library's anteroom, was candid, her novelist's eye dissecting the household. "Iris was no mere secretary," she said, her pen poised. "She had a knack for uncovering secrets, family secrets, I'd wager. People like that don't last long in houses like this." Her tone was almost gleeful, and Poirot wondered if her curiosity bordered on complicity. Captain Ramsay, questioned on the terrace, was laconic, claiming a walk in the gardens despite the drizzle. "I needed air," he said, his scarred hands flexing. When Poirot asked if he had spoken to Iris, Ramsay's eyes darkened. She was a quiet sort, kept to herself. His brevity was a shield, and Poirot sensed a man accustomed to hiding. His past, returning to the library, Poirot examined the scene anew, the constable watching warily. The dagger, now removed by the police, had left a stark wound in Iris's dress. The singed note, safely in Poirot's pocket, nagged at his mind. Its words suggested a warning, but to whom? The candle, its wax hardened into an odd shape, drew his attention again. He ran a finger along its base, feeling a faint ridge. Using a penknife, he pried gently, revealing a tiny brass key embedded in the wax, invisible to the untrained eye. It was too small for a door, but might fit a drawer or box. Poirot's pulse quickened. This was no accident. He crossed to Iris's desk, a modest piece tucked in a corner, and tested the key in its locked drawer. It turned smoothly, revealing a ledger bound in green leather. Its pages listed payments to VC for discrete services, the amounts substantial and dated over several months. Victor Crane's initials were unmistakable, but what services had he provided? Poirot closed the drawer, pocketing the key, and resolved to confront Crane later. As he stepped back, a faint burn mark on the carpet near the bookcase caught his eye. Lighting a match, he held it near the hidden panel, watching the flame flicker. In a draft, the passage, he confirmed, was a viable route for the murderer. But who had used it, and why had Iris been targeted? Her role as secretary, her access to Blackthorn's secrets, and the mysterious ledger pointed to a deeper intrigue, one that the candlelight had yet to fully illuminate. Lunch was a subdued affair, the guests' appetites dulled by the morning's interrogations. Clara whispered to Dr. Ashby, her voice sharp, while Sir Reginald retreated behind his newspaper. Lady Evelyn's composure wavered, her eyes lingering on Poirot as if seeking reassurance. Crane attempted to lighten the mood with a story of a Venetian art heist, but it fell flat. Mrs. Lyle watched, her pen ever present, and Ramsay's silence was a wall none dared breach. Poirot, sipping his coffee, observed the interplay of glances, the unspoken accusations. The shadows of suspicion had fallen over Blackthorn Manor, and each guest, in their own way, seemed to fear the light. The ledger, the key, the passage, all were pieces of a puzzle that Poirot was determined to solve. For the truth, as the singed note promised, burned brighter than any flame. Chapter 5. The candle's secret. The fog that clung to Blackthorn Manor had thickened by mid-morning, muffling the world beyond the leaded windows and casting the library in a spectral half-light. Hercule Poirot stood alone in the room where Iris Temple had met her end, the constable having retreated to the corridor at his request. The air was heavy with the scent of old leather and wax, and the single candle on the table, now extinguished, seemed to hold court over the scene of the crime. Poirot's sharp eyes retraced the details. The armchair where Iris had slumped, the dagger now removed by Inspector Cobb's men, the singed note in his pocket, and the hidden passage behind the bookcase. The tiny brass key he had found embedded in the candle's wax weighed lightly in his hand, a silent promise of revelation. His grey cells hummed with anticipation. The candle, he sensed, was more than a prop in this grim tableau. It was a beacon to the truth. Poirot returned to the candle, its hardened wax an irregular sculpture under the grey light filtering through the curtains. The indentation where he had found the key was subtle, a testament to the murderer's cunning. He examined the table beneath, its polished surface unmarred, save for a faint ring where the candle had stood. The wax had pooled unevenly, suggesting it had been tilted or moved while still molten. Poirot's moustache twitched as he considered. The implications: had the key been hidden deliberately, or was it an oversight in a hurried act? He lit a match, holding it near the bookcase, and noted again the faint draft that stirred the flame. The hidden passage, accessible only to those who knew its secret, was a vital clue. But the candle itself held his focus now. He crossed to Iris's desk, where the green leather ledger lay hidden in the locked drawer. The key had opened it easily, revealing payments to VC Victor Crane, presumably for discreet services. The sums were substantial, ranging from £50 to £200, dated over the past year. Poirot flipped through the pages, noting Iris's precise handwriting, her entries meticulous but cryptic. No further details clarified the nature of these services, but the amounts suggested something beyond mere clerical work. Had Iris been complicit in Crane's dealings, or had she uncovered them, threatening exposure? Poirot closed the ledger, slipping it back into the drawer, and resolved to confront Crane before the day was out. Stepping to the bookcase, he pressed the panel again, the mechanism clicking softly as it revealed the narrow passage. The air within was damp, the walls rough with age, and a faint smell of mildew hung about. Poirot ascended the cramped staircase to the attic, his handkerchief pressed to his nose. The attic was a labyrinth of trunks and cobwebs, lit by a single dormer window. Dust motes danced in the weak light, and Poirot's eyes scanned the floor for signs of recent passage. Near a pile of crates, he found a torn scrap of fabric, its sapphire hue matching Clara Marwood's dress from the previous evening. He pocketed it, his mind turning to Clara's nervous demeanor and her claim of being in the conservatory with Dr. Ashby. Had she used the passage to reach Iris unseen? Returning to the library, Poirot noticed a faint burn mark on the carpet near the bookcase, barely visible in the dim light. He knelt, touching the singed fibers, and deduced it came from a candle held low. Perhaps, as the murderer navigated the passage, the candle's role grew clearer. It was not merely a source of light, but a tool, a hiding place, a misdirection. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of the butler, who announced that Inspector Cobb had returned with preliminary findings. In the drawing room, Cobb stood with his notebook open, his florid face creased with frustration. The guests were assembled, their faces a gallery of unease. Lady Evelyn, her hands clasped tightly. Sir Reginald, his eyes distant. Clara, pale and fidgeting. Dr. Ashby, withdrawn. Victor Crane, forcing a smile. Mrs. Dorothy Lyle, scribbling as ever. And Captain Hugh Ramsay, his jaw set. Cobb cleared his throat. The dagger's clean of prints, save for Miss Temple's. But the angle confirms murder, as Mr. Poirot suggested. No trace of forced entry, and the window latches are intact. We're still testing the note for ink and origin. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. And the time of death, Monsieur l'Inspecteur, between 9 and 10 last night. Based on rigor, Cobb replied. She'd been dead about an hour when you found her. This placed the murder shortly after dinner, when the guests claimed to be scattered about the manor. Poirot turned to Victor Crane, his voice deceptively mild. Monsieur Crane, you are a man of the art world. Did you know Mademoiselle Temple well? Crane's smile faltered, his hands smoothing his waistcoat. Barely, old chap. She was the quiet sort, kept to her ledgers and letters. And yet, Poirot continued, producing the ledger from his pocket. This ledger suggests you received payments from her, or through her, for discreet services. Care to explain? The room tensed, all eyes on Crane. His florid cheeks paled, but he recovered quickly. Nonsense. I deal in paintings, not secrets. Must be some clerical error. His laugh was hollow, and Poirot noted Mrs. Lyle's pen pause, her eyes narrowing. Before Poirot could press further, Clara spoke, her voice sharp. Why are we hounding Victor? Iris was poking into everyone's business. She probably made enemies. Her outburst drew a sharp look from Dr. Ashby, who murmured, Clara, please. Poirot filed away the tension between them, recalling the sapphire fabric in the attic. He turned to Lady Evelyn. Madame, you said Mademoiselle Temple managed personal matters. Did she ever mention a sapphire, perhaps tied to Blackthorn's history? Lady Evelyn's eyes widened, her hand rising to her throat. The Marwood sapphire. It's a legend an ancestor hid it during the Civil War, but it's never been found. Iris was researching our archives for a book, but she found nothing, I'm sure. Her voice wavered, and Sir Reginald's newspaper rustled, his knuckles white. Poirot's questions were interrupted by a commotion at the door. The constable entered, holding a small velvet pouch found in Iris's room, tucked inside her suitcase. Inside was a single sapphire earring, its design intricate, matching descriptions of the stolen London necklace. Gasps rippled through the room. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, and Dr. Ashby's face darkened. Crane's eyes darted to the exit, while Mrs. Lyle's pen raced across her notebook. Ramsay remained impassive, but his fingers flexed, as if itching for action. "Mon dear," Poirot murmured, holding the earring to the light. "This changes much. Was Iris a thief, or had she uncovered another's crime?" The candle's secret, the hidden key pointed to a deeper truth, one tied to the manor's shadows and the guests' hidden motives. As lunch was announced, Poirot lingered, his mind tracing the connections, the ledger, the passage, the earring, and the burn mark. The candle had revealed one secret, but others remained, flickering just beyond the light's reach. Chapter 6. The Missing Sapphire, the dining room of Blackthorn Manor. Bathed in the muted glow of a grey noon, felt oppressively silent as the guests reassembled for luncheon. The fog outside pressed against the mullioned windows, blurring the world beyond into a featureless haze, and the air within carried a weight of suspicion that no amount of claret could dispel. Hercule Poirot, seated near the head of the table, observed the company with his customary precision, his dark eyes flitting from face to face. The discovery of the sapphire earring in Iris Temple's room had cast a new shadow over the gathering, and the spectre of the stolen London necklace, rumoured to be tied to the mythical Marwood sapphire, hung heavy in the room. Poirot's grey cells were alight, piecing together the threads of motive and opportunity. The tiny brass key from the candles wax a talisman in his pocket. Lady Evelyn Marwood, presiding over the meal, wore a mask of brittle composure, her auburn hair catching the dim light as she directed the servants with a trembling hand. Her emerald gown had been replaced by a sombre navy dress, as if mourning had already settled upon her. Sir Reginald, at the table's far end, toyed with his fork, his patrician features set in a scowl. Clara Marwood, her blonde curls wilting, sat close to Dr. Leonard Ashby, whose pallor and averted gaze suggested a man wrestling with private demons. Victor Crane, his usual flamboyance subdued, sipped his wine with forced nonchalance, while Mrs. Dorothy Lyle's sharp eyes darted between her plate and her ever-present notebook. Captain Hugh Ramsay, his military bearing intact, ate methodically, his scarred hands steady but his silence profound. The meal roast lamb with rosemary and minted peas was served with mechanical efficiency, but the conversation was stilted, punctuated by the clink of silver and the occasional cough. Poirot, sipping a glass of mineral water, broke the silence with deliberate tact. The sapphire earring, found in Mademoiselle Temple's room, is most curious, none, it suggests. A connection to the stolen necklace. Yet how did it come to be in her possession? His voice was mild, but his gaze was piercing, sweeping the table for reactions. Lady Evelyn's fork paused mid-air, her lips parting slightly. "It's unthinkable," she said, her voice low. Iris was no thief. She must have found it. Perhaps while researching the archives, her eyes flicked to Sir Reginald, who cleared his throat and muttered, "Nonsense. The Marwood sapphire is a fairy tale. That earring could belong to anyone." His dismissal was sharp, but Poirot noted the faint sheen of perspiration on his brow. Mrs. Lyle leaned forward, her novelist's curiosity undimmed. The Marwood sapphire is no mere legend, Sir Reginald. My research for my last novel uncovered tales of a gem hidden here during the Civil War, blue as midnight, worth a king's ransom. If Iris stumbled upon it, or something like it, she'd have made enemies. Her tone was almost gleeful, and Poirot marked her eagerness to weave the tragedy into her next manuscript. Clara's voice, sharp and sudden, cut through the murmur. Why are we talking about jewels? Iris is dead. Someone stabbed her, and we're all sitting here like it's a parlor game. Her blue eyes were wide, her hands trembling as she clutched her napkin. Dr. Ashby placed a hand on hers, but his touch was fleeting, his expression strained. Clara, calm yourself, he murmured, though his own voice lacked conviction. Poirot observed the exchange, recalling the sapphire fabric he had found in the attic, matching Clara's dress. Had her outburst been genuine grief or a deflection? Victor. Crane, seizing the moment, raised his glass with a forced smile. Let's not jump to conclusions. Iris might have been holding the earring for someone else, a friend, perhaps. The art world is full of such intrigues. His attempt at levity fell flat, and Poirot's eyes narrowed. Crane's connection to the ledger's VSK entries loomed large, and his glibness suggested a man eager to divert attention. Captain Ramsay, who had spoken little, set down his knife with deliberate care. Jewels, secret sits, all speculation. What matters is who had access to that passage, and why they wanted her dead. His voice was low, his gaze steady, but Poirot noted a flicker of unease in his eyes, as if he regretted drawing attention to himself. The meal concluded with a lemon syllabub, barely touched by the guests. Poirot excused himself, his mind fixed on the sapphire earring and its implications. He retreated to Iris's room, a small chamber on the second floor, its simplicity a stark contrast to the manor's grandeur. The constable had sealed the room, but Poirot, with a nod and a murmured explanation, was granted access. The suitcase where the earring had been found lay open on the bed, its contents neatly arranged, modest dresses, a few books, and a locked diary. Poirot tested the brass key from the candle, but it did not fit the diary's lock. He searched further, finding a hidden compartment in the suitcase's lining. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded tightly, bearing a sketch of a sapphire necklace with annotations in Iris's hand. Marwood crest, 1643, hidden in the west wing. The sketch matched descriptions of the stolen London necklace, but the note suggested Iris had been tracing the Marwood sapphire's history. Had she uncovered a real treasure, or was the earring a modern counterfeit linked to Crane's dealings? Poirot pocketed the sketch, his thoughts turning to the west wing, an older part of the manor rarely used. He sought out Lady Evelyn in her private sitting room, a space adorned with delicate watercolors and a rosewood desk. She stood by the window, staring into the fog, her hands clasped tightly. Madame, Poirot began, you mentioned Iris's research into the Marwood sapphire. Did she ever speak of the West Wing? Lady Evelyn turned, her face pale. She was fascinated by the old stories, but I told her they were myths. The West Wing is crumbling and she had no business there. Her voice was firm, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Poirot pressed gently, and yet she found this earring, perhaps a clue to a greater prize. Did she share her findings with anyone? Lady Evelyn shook her head, but her hesitation suggested otherwise. She was discreet, Monsieur Poirot. If she found something, she kept it to herself. Poirot nodded, sensing her reticence hid a deeper truth. His next stop was the West Wing. a labyrinth of dusty corridors and locked rooms, accessible via a side staircase. The air was cold, the walls damp with age. Poirot moved cautiously, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. In a disused parlor, he found signs of recent disturbance: footprints in the dust, a displaced rug. Beneath it, a loose floorboard revealed a small cavity, empty but for a faint scratch mark, as if something had been recently removed. The sapphire, perhaps, or another clue Iris had pursued. Returning to the main house, Poirot encountered Clara in the hall, her face flushed, as if she had been crying. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "I can't bear this." Iris was prying into things, family things, she had no right. Her outburst was revealing, and Poirot recalled the sapphire fabric in the attic. "Mademoiselle," he said softly, "did you see Iris in the library that night?" Clara's eyes widened, then dropped. "No, I was with Leonard. I swear it." Her denial was too quick, and Poirot made a mental note to revisit her alibi as the afternoon waned. Poirot sat in the library, the candles waxed before him, its secret key now joined by the sketch and the fabric scrap. The sapphire earring was no mere trinket, it was a link to a theft, a legend, and a murder. Iris had been close to a truth that someone deemed worth killing for, and the West Wing, with its empty hiding place, suggested the prize was still at play. The guests' alibis were fraying, their motives sharpening, and Poirot knew the missing sapphire held the key to unmasking the killer in Blackthorn's shadowed halls. Chapter 7. The nighttime revelation. The evening at Blackthorn Manor descended with a palpable weight, the fog outside thickening into a curtain that smothered the last traces of daylight. The drawing room, where Hercule Poirot had gathered the guests, was lit solely by candlelight at his insistence, the flickering tapers casting restless shadows across the brocaded walls. The candelabras, relics of the manor's storied past, stood like sentinels on the mantel and side tables, their flames dancing in the draught that seeped through the ancient windows. Poirot stood near the fireplace, his small, neat figure commanding the room's attention, his moustache immaculate despite the hour. The guests sat in a tense semicircle, their faces illuminated by the uneven glow. Lady Evelyn Marwood, her hands clasped tightly, Sir Reginald, his patrician features rigid. Clara Marwood, her eyes red-rimmed. Dr. Leonard Ashby, pale and withdrawn. Victor Crane, his usual bravado faltering. Mrs. Dorothy Lyle, her notebook poised. And Captain Hugh Ramsay, his scarred hands folded, his gaze impenetrable. Poirot had orchestrated this gathering with precision, sensing that the candlelight, so central to the manor's traditions and Iris Temple's murder, would unsettle the guilty and coax hidden truths into the open. The sapphire earring, the ledger's cryptic entries, the torn fabric, and the empty cavity in the West Wing had sharpened his suspicions, but the puzzle remained incomplete. Tonight, he aimed to provoke a revelation, to let the murderer's own nerves betray them under the flickering light. "Madame et Messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and deliberate. "The murder of Mademoiselle Iris Temple is a crime of cunning, committed in a locked room, yet not so locked as it seemed. The hidden passage, the dagger, the singed note-all point to a mind that seeks to deceive. But the candle, it speaks to Hercule Poirot. Its wax hid a key, its flame a secret. Tonight, we shall recreate the moments before the scream, and the truth, it will emerge." He gestured to the butler, who dimmed the electric chandelier, leaving only the candles to illuminate the room. The effect was immediate. The guests' faces grew sharper, their eyes darting nervously. Poirot paced slowly, his shoes silent on the Aubusson rug. Each of you has given an alibi for the hour of the murder, between 9 and 10. Let us revisit these claims under the same light that lit the library when Mademoiselle Temple met her end. He began with Lady Evelyn, her navy dress blending into the shadows. Madame, you were in the dining room, overseeing the staff. Oui, she nodded, her voice steady but her fingers twisting her handkerchief. Yes, I was ensuring the silver was polished for the next day. I heard nothing until the scream. Poirot noted her composure, but her eyes avoided his, lingering. On the candelabra, Sir Reginald was next, his voice clipped. I was in my study, as I told you, reviewing correspondence. Tedious diplomatic matters. He adjusted his cufflinks, and Poirot recalled the ink smudge on his cuff, a detail at odds with his meticulous nature. And you saw no one, monsieur? Poirot pressed. Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. No one. Clara and Dr. Ashby, seated close, repeated their claim of being in the conservatory. Clara's voice was shrill. We were looking at the orchids. Leonard loves them. We were together the whole time. Dr. Ashby nodded, but his eyes were fixed on the floor, and Poirot recalled the sapphire fabric in the attic, matching dress, mademoiselle, he said softly. You are certain you did not visit the library? Clara's cheeks flushed, and she stammered, Of course not. Victor Crane, his florid face glistening, claimed he was in the hall, admiring a portrait. A fine piece, that Gainsborough. I was lost in it. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And yet, monsieur, the ledger suggests you were more involved with Mademoiselle Temple than you admit. He produced the green leather book, its pages open to the VC entries. Crane's smile froze. I told you, it's a mistake. I deal in art, not secrets. His voice carried a tremor, and Mrs. Lyle's pen scratched furiously, capturing the moment Mrs. Lyle herself claimed to have been in her room, writing. I heard the scream from upstairs, she said, her tone detached. I thought it was a servant dropping something. Her calmness was almost too perfect, and Poirot wondered if her novelists I had seen more than she revealed. Captain Ramsay's alibi was the weakest. I was walking in the gardens, he said, his voice low. Needed air after dinner. Poirot tilted his head. In the drizzle, captain your boots. They were spotless when we found the body. Ramsay's eyes darkened, and he shifted. In his seat, I kept to the gravel paths, he muttered. Poirot pressed further. Did you speak with Mademoiselle Temple earlier that evening? Ramsay hesitated, then admitted. She asked to meet me briefly in the library before dinner. Said she needed to loan something about a family matter. I refused, and that was that. His admission hung in the air, and Clara's sharp intake of breath was audible. Poirot turned to the group, his voice rising slightly. One of you used the hidden passage to enter the library, to silence Mademoiselle Temple before she could reveal a truth too dangerous to be spoken. The sapphire earring, the ledger, the Marwood legend, these are not mere coincidences. Iris knew of dealings that threatened someone in this room. He paused, letting the candlelight play across their faces. Mademoiselle Clara, you have something to add, Nan? Clara's hands flew to her face, her voice breaking. I did go to the library, all right. I used the passage. I found a letter in Leonard's Cotta love note to Iris. I confronted her, but she was alive when I left, I swear. Dr. Ashby's face drained of color, his hands gripping the armrests. Clara, you never said. He began, but his voice trailed off under Poirot's gaze. The room erupted in murmurs. Lady Evelyn's handkerchief now shredded, Sir Reginald's scowl deepening. Crane's laugh was forced, and Mrs. Lyle's pen raced across her notebook. Ramsay's silence was a wall, his eyes fixed on Clara. Poirot raised a hand for silence. "The letter, Mademoiselle Clara, where is it now?" She shook her head, tears spilling. "I tore it up, threw it in the fire. I was so angry." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The love note was a new thread, but it did not explain the sapphire or the ledger. He turned to Crane. "Monsieur, the payments to VC, they were 4 stolen artifacts, were they not? Books, perhaps, or jewels, funneled through your connections." Crane's face reddened, and he stammered, "I dealt in rare books for Sir Reginald, yes, but nothing illegal." Iris must have misunderstood. Sir Reginald's newspaper fell to the floor, his hands trembling. Poirot stepped closer to the candelabra, its flames steady despite the tension. The candle in the library hid a key to secrets. The singed note spoke of truth burning bright. Someone here feared Iris's knowledge of the sapphire, of illicit dealings, of love or betrayal. The passage was their path, the dagger, their tool. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. "The truth is close, Madame, messieurs, and the candlelight will reveal it." As the guests dispersed, their alibis frayed and their secrets exposed, Poirot remained by the fireplace, the candles casting his shadow long and sharp. Clara's confession, Ramsay's loan, Crane's dealings were pieces of the puzzle, but the murderer's identity remained just beyond the light. The sapphire, the ledger, and the passage pointed to a motive rooted in Blackthorn's shadows. And Poirot knew the final revelation was near, waiting to be illuminated by the Manors. Flickering flames. Chapter 8. The Flame of Truth. The Library of Blackthorn. Manor was a theatre of shadows as Hercule Poirot assembled the household on the final morning of his investigation. The fog that had cloaked the Sussex countryside for days had lifted, allowing a pale winter sun to filter through the mullioned windows, but Poirot had insisted on candlelight once more. The candelabras, their tapers freshly lit, cast a warm, flickering glow across the leather-bound volumes and the polished oak table where Iris Temple's body had been found. The air was thick with anticipation, the scent of wax mingling with the faint must of old books. Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small frame radiating authority, his moustache perfectly symmetrical, his dark eyes gleaming with the clarity of a man who had unraveled a knot of human deceit. The guests sat in a tense arc before him, their faces etched with varying degrees of dread and curiosity. Lady Evelyn Marwood, in a high-necked black dress, clutched a lace handkerchief, her auburn hair tightly pinned, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Sir Reginald Marwood, his silver hair dishevelled for the first time, sat rigidly, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. Clara Marwood, her blonde curls limp, leaned against Dr. Leonard Ashby, whose pallor and downturned mouth betrayed a man haunted by secrets. Victor Crane, his florid cheeks drained of their usual vigour, toyed nervously with his watch chain. Mrs. Dorothy Lyle, her sharp features alight with anticipation, held her notebook like a talisman. Captain Hugh Ramsay, his military posture unbroken, stared straight ahead, his scarred hands folded, his expression unreadable. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, pacing slowly before the candelabras, their flames steady despite the faint draught from the hidden passage behind the bookcase. "Madame, messieurs," he began, his voice resonant in the quiet room. "The murder of Mademoiselle Iris Temple was no act of passion, no crime of impulse. None. It was a calculated act, designed to silence a woman who had uncovered a truth too dangerous to be spoken. The candlelight, it has guided us to this moment, revealing secrets hidden in wax, in shadows, in the very heart of Blackthorn Manor. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Let us reconstruct the crime. Mademoiselle Temple was found in this library, a dagger in her chest, the door locked from within, the windows latched. A singed note in her hand read, "The truth burns brighter than any flame." At first, it seemed a locked room mystery, but the hidden passage behind the bookcase, known only to the Marwood family, provided the means. The candle, it held a tiny key, concealed in its wax, which opened a drawer containing a ledger of payments to V.C. Monsieur Victor Cranefort, discreet services. A sapphire earring, linked to a stolen London necklace, was found in Iris's room, and a sketch in her suitcase pointed to the Marwood sapphire, a legend of a gem hidden in this very house. These are not mere clues, they are the threads of a tapestry of greed and fear. The guests shifted uneasily, their eyes darting to one another. Poirot continued, his tone measured but relentless. Iris Temple was no ordinary secretary. She was tasked with cataloguing Sir Reginald's rare books, a collection rumoured to include stolen volumes. She also researched the Marwood sapphire, uncovering a connection to the stolen necklace. Her ledger recorded payments to Monsieur Crane, who, I submit, was fencing stolen artifacts books, perhaps, or jewels through his art world connections. Iris, with her quiet efficiency, discovered this, and she confronted the one who stood to lose the most. She turned to Sir Reginald, whose face had turned ashen. Monsieur Marwood, your reputation as a diplomat, your standing in society, it rested on the secrecy of your dealings. The rare books in your study, some acquired through Monsieur Crane, were not all legally obtained. Iris found evidence of this, and when she uncovered the sapphire earring, she realized it was part of the stolen London necklace, perhaps even the Marwood sapphire itself. She threatened to expose you, did she not? Sir Reginald's hands trembled, his voice hoarse. This is preposterous. I dealt in books, yes, but I had no hand in her death. His denial was vehement, but Poirot's gaze was unyielding. Nan, Monsieur Poirot said softly. You lured Iris to the library after dinner, using the hidden passage to enter unseen. You stabbed her with the dagger, a family heirloom kept in this very room. You locked the door from within, planting the singed note to suggest a grander mystery. A note you wrote, its corner burned to create confusion. The candle's wax concealed the key to Iris's drawer, which you overlooked in your haste. But you made one fatal error. Poirot reached into his pocket, producing a small gold cufflink, its surface etched with the Marwood crest. This was found near the bookcase, dropped as you exited the passage. Only you, as a Marwood, knew of that passage's existence. Lady, Evelyn gasped, her handkerchief falling to the floor. Clara's eyes widened, her hand clutching Dr. Ashby's arm. Crane's mouth opened, but no words came. Mrs. Lyle's pen paused, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the denouement. Ramsay's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Poirot pressed on. The sapphire earring was a clue Iris had found, perhaps in the West Wing, where a hiding place lay empty. You, Monsieur Marwood, feared her knowledge not only of the books, but of the necklace, which could ruin you. The payments to Crane were your attempt to dispose of stolen goods, but Iris's ledger threatened to expose it all. You killed her to protect your name, your legacy. Sir Reginald rose, his face contorted. Enough. I had no choice. She was going to the police, to ruin everything. The books, the sapphire, was all for the family, for Blackthorn. His voice broke, and he sank back into his chair, his hands covering his face. The room was silent, the candle's flames unwavering. Lady Evelyn stood, her voice trembling. Reginald, how could you? Tears welled in her eyes, but she held herself erect, a pillar of betrayed dignity. Clara sobbed quietly, and Dr. Ashby's face was a mask of shock. Crane muttered under his breath, his relief palpable, while Mrs. Lyle scribbled furiously, already crafting her next bestseller. Ramsay's expression softened, as if a burden had lifted. Inspector Cobb, who had stood quietly in the corner, stepped forward, his earlier bluster replaced by deference. "Well, Mr. Poirot, you've done it again. I'll take it from here." He signalled to the constable, who approached Sir Reginald, who offered no resistance as he was led away. Poirot turned to Lady Evelyn, his voice gentle. "Madame, the truth is painful, but it is better to know than to live in shadows. Mademoiselle Temple's death was a tragedy, but her memory is honoured by justice." She nodded, her eyes glistening, and murmured a quiet thank you as the guests dispersed. The candles were extinguished, and the library fell into darkness. Poirot lingered, his gaze on the empty armchair where Iris had died. The sapphire, the ledger, the passagel had led to this moment, where the flame of truth had burned away deceit. He adjusted his Homburg hat, his mustache giving a satisfied twitch, and stepped into the hall, where the clear Sussex sky promised a new day, unclouded by the manor's secrets. The end.